Greetings and salutations to all our friends who are joining us on the YouTube platform. Again, let me just welcome you to the weekly Bible study of the Temple Hall New Testament Church of God. I want to thank you for your participation and the fact that you have been joining us for these lessons. And of course, we want to really give God thanks for the interest that you're showing in the Word. And so, as we continue in our study on the book of Daniel, I want to present our second lesson, which is, of course, Daniel, a prophet at court. This, of course, kind of sets Daniel apart from all the other prophets of the Old and New Testaments, because Daniel, unlike Ezekiel, unlike Isaiah, unlike Jeremiah, these men were prophets unto the masses. Daniel was a prophet unto the politician. God used him to influence politics. One of the things that I've always advocated was not for even Christians to be away from even Jamaican politics, but to invade it and to change it. Now, that's more easily said than done. But nonetheless, the idea is that as Daniel was a politician at court and was able to influence the other politicians for God, even so, there should be modern Daniels who are able to go into parliament and not allow parliament to go into them. And so we want to look at this man at court as he continues to lift up his Lord. We want to look also at the fact that as Daniel settles in, he is about to introduce the then known world to the one who changes the times and the seasons. Let us get into our study with a small recap of last week. Last week, we looked at, just the general book of Daniel, the fact that it bears the name of its author. A portion of this book is written in the ancient Aramaic language, which was the language of the empire at the time, just to let you know. So it is written in both Hebrew and Aramaic. And so from about chapter 2 and verse 4 into chapter 7 to the end, it is in Aramaic. And the belief is that because this portion covers that segment where Daniel is speaking to the people of the empire, from chapter 8 to the end, Daniel is actually looking into the prophecies that point to the end of the age, as he introduces the Ancient of Days, and as he speaks to those things that will come to pass. We looked also at the history of the exile, because the book of Daniel was written while the children of Israel were down in exile. And so we looked at the reason why Daniel we looked at the reason. Just a moment, everybody. All right, thank you so much. We looked at the reasons why the people of Israel were down in Babylonian exile, and what had caused them to really be sold into slavery, so to speak, as they offended God. And we highlighted those things to be that they had religion of God without relationship with God. We looked at the fact that they were unjust people who were willing to oppress their fellows just to get what they wanted. We looked at their false security in the fact that they were Abraham's seed and the fact that they had the temple. And so by virtue of that, God sold them into exile as punishment. We looked at the fact that the exile was for 70 years and that Daniel would be the one who would lift that up. We looked at the deportation of Daniel and his friends, the fact that they were brought down as young men of royal descent and placed into what we call the parliament of King Nebuchadnezzar, who had just started to reign 1 year at the time. And also, we highlighted the faithfulness of these young men who refused to, when the Babylonians sought to change their names and their identities and to change their diets and their laws. They decided that they were going to stand firm for God. And even if they fell to a point where they failed, they were going to give God the benefit of their faithfulness. We see the test of God's providence, where God showed his faithfulness to these young men who were faithful to him and allowed them to find favor. We look at the elevation of Daniel and his friends in the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar and the fact that God gave them favor in the empire. And so we want to move to chapter 2 this evening. And it's interesting because we cannot finish chapter 2 this evening. And chapter 2 is a pivotal chapter in the book of Daniel. All of these chapters are loaded, but I want us to understand how the writer allows us to follow the career of Daniel and to follow his contribution. And the fact that Daniel, while he was not speaking to the masses, was able to show his God, to glorify his God, to exemplify his God in the midst of evil people. So let's see if we can get to the book. Now, let me just allow us to know that this was the 3rd year of Nebuchadnezzar's conquest. Now, if you read chapter 2 and verse 1, it will tell you that in the 3rd year, or in the 2nd year rather, of Nebuchadnezzar's rule, but it's actually his 3rd year. Why is it his 3rd year? Because he ruled as a regent with his father. His father's name was Nabopolassar. That was his dad. And his father allowed him to rule as a regent, for a year before he gave the throne over fully to him, or before the throne came fully to him. So when we look at chapter 1, it is speaking to that time when Nabopolassar gave Nebuchadnezzar the authority to reign under his supervision. And that's why Nebuchadnezzar, during this particular time, was such a ruthless warrior, because he had to let his father know that he was capable of running and ruling the empire. So in chapter 2, when it says the 2nd year, it's actually his 3rd year, but it's just the 2nd year of his sovereign rule not being under the rule of his father or the supervision of his father. And so let's just look at these few verses that we can tonight as I share with you what is the purpose of some of the things that you're about to see. It says, Daniel chapter 2, verse 1 to 3, and in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, and the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. So let's look at a few things here from these 3 verses. The first thing we learn about the dream, or the king here, is that in his 3rd year of rule, which is 2nd year according to what this chapter says, he had a recurring dream. So I want to let you know, when it said he dreamed dreams, they introduced that plural form to allow you to know that the dream was a recurring dream. It wasn't many different dreams. And you see that later on, that when Daniel showed him the dream, he was able to say, yes, that's the dream. So it was a recurring dream, one dream that he kept having over and over and over again. And whenever he had the dream, it would trouble his mind. And you're going to see, as we go further, a little background into dreams and all of this. And so you find that he was having the same dream over and over again. And the dreams plagued him. They puzzled him, or it puzzled him. And he was unaware of what it was. Now, one of the things that I must highlight is that this dream did not come to Daniel. No, sir. The dreams came to a secular tyrant whom, given the opportunity, would have been the worst enemy that any man or woman of faith could have. Years ago, I got into trouble while I was on Facebook during the height of the whole Donald Trump saga, when I said, you know, if God can call Nebuchadnezzar his servant and Cyrus his shepherd, is Donald Trump worse than that? Man, they ate off my head. And that was when I found the power of hatred. That hatred has such a power that, you know, it looks past all reason when it decides that it is going to get its way. Hatred is a powerful thing. Just as love is powerful and it influences those who do love, so is hatred. So I was pointing to the fact that the hatred of one man allowed persons who are normally reasonable people, to really be reckless and go overboard. But the dreams came to the ruler of the Babylonian Empire. And it is important to note, you know, brothers and sisters, that irrespective of the positions of individuals with whom we must interact, we must engage, or even those who have been given charge to rule over us, you know, they are all still, and we are all still human beings. And so still subject to the divine power, unction, and might of the Almighty God. And so a wicked tyrant can have a dream coming from God. Now it says that when these dreams came upon Nebuchadnezzar, he summoned the wise men from across the realm of his empire, all of them. And he summoned the magicians. So there are 4 categories that he brought here in. He brought in what they call the wise men. He brought in the magicians. He brought in the astrologers. And he brought in the sorcerers, also known as the Chaldeans. And you're going to understand what this was about. Now, we looked last week at the fact that the idea of magicians were actually Babylonian and Egyptian sages, those who have a particular caste, of a particular category that worked in politics of the ancient times. What gave them their definitiveness was that they practiced the occult. These were men that declared that they saw beyond the natural and they saw into the supernatural. And they were practitioners of sorcery, and they used incantations. They used particular words and particular formula to try to get their way. Now we're going to look a little further into it as we go on. But these magicians were seen as what we call wise men to some extent. I don't want to mix them up because they kind of overlap, but I want you to get it. Then there were the astrologers, and these were enchanters and necromancers. Necromancers are people who talk to the dead, right? They were conjurers. They conjured up the spirit of the departed. And so some of us would call them into the Obiaman, you know, and Deal Arants, and all of these names that we use, but it carries the same connotation. So if he sent for the magicians, or the wise men of this time are literally seen as magicians and such, we have to get an idea of what it meant to be a magician, right? Now, first of all, we must understand that by all indications and by all definitions, magic is about manipulation. Let me say it again. Magic and sorcery and all of that is about manipulation. Manipulating others through means unknown to get mastery over them. So when we would watch these American-made and these English-made programs back in the day, you know, we would see a witch or a sorcerer saying, I cast a spell on you. And that spell was to induce the victim to do the will of the one who put the spell on him or her. So the idea is that magic, right, is an attempt to influence persons and events by recourse to superhuman powers. In other words, it is seeking to influence, manipulate, to master others by means of the spirit world, the supernatural world, the world of Elohim, the world of the spirits. And so magic is a science of the occult. You must understand that. No matter how harmless it seems, it is coming from an occultic foundation. And so the word the magi, what is said to be the men who visited Jesus, the wise men. There weren't three of them, there were more than three. The wise men that visited Jesus from the east, many believed that they were magi, magicians, astrologers, people who practice the science of the occult, right? You see, a priestly caste of people that came out of the Medo-Persian Empire. And remember that after the Babylonian Empire, and you will see later on as we go further in chapter 2, that after Babylon, the rest was taken over by Medo-Persia. And of course, the functions were largely associated with magic, again, and the occult. So let's see if I can wrap up with a magician. A magician is one who tries by certain prescribed words and actions to influence people and events, bringing about results beyond means of their own power to effect. So they're seeking to effect things on others that is beyond their own power. And the magicians were summoned by Nebuchadnezzar because of what? Because of the fact that there was a dream, a recurrent dream that came, right? And so when you look at the idea of a dream, I'm not sure if anyone has ever really tried to define a dream, but let's look at it. A dream speaks to a series of thoughts, images that occur during sleep. And it speaks of anything seemingly of reality that occurs when one is sleeping. It is a coherent imagery sequence occurring during sleep. Hear what From defines sleep as. From defines sleep as meaningful and significant expression of any kind of mental activity under the activity of sleep. In other words, dreams come when one is asleep. Now, in the ancient world, you find that these people, especially the Jews, they held dreamers in high esteem. And if you look at some of the main people, especially of the Old Testament, they were dreamers. You look at Jacob, he was a dreamer. When Jacob came to Luz, otherwise known as Bethel, he dreamed that he saw the ladder going up into heaven, and God appeared unto him there. We know the story of Joseph, who dreamed that the sun and the moon and the 12 stars bowed down before him. And he was also able to interpret dreams. We read of Daniel, of course, who is known as a man in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, according to the writer of Daniel. And he was an interpreter of dreams. So the ancient peoples saw these things or these dreams to be important. Even in Jamaica, land we love, and coming out of our African ancestry, dreams were seen as a line from a plane that we are not able to engage with the natural man, you know? So dreams are often seen as messages that come even while we sleep. Hear what Oppenheim observes. He observes that in the ancient Near East, dream experiences were noted on three clearly differentiated planes. You know, one of the things I've often said is that many of us today, in the age of information, believe that we are more educated than the ancient man. I think most of the things that we do today, you know, are actually a rehashing of things that were established long ago and lost during the dark period, the dark ages, you know. But these men literally had a science to dreams, right? In the ancient Near East, the dreams took three particular engagements. One, dreams came as revelation of the gods, right? And these dreams that came as a result of the interaction and the will of the gods. And again, this is how the ancients saw it. It could be interpreted or not interpreted. It didn't matter if it was in this category. The second category is that these dreams would literally speak of the state of the mind, you know, and the spiritual health of the dreamers. For example, the same book with Nebuchadnezzar, later on, you're going to see Nebuchadnezzar dreaming of his own pride and his own pomp and his own arrogance and what is going to happen to him as a result of that. So sometimes it reflects in a symptomatic way the state of one's mind or their spiritual health. And God gives Nebuchadnezzar a whole lot of dreams. And then thirdly, dreams that are mantic, dreams that are relating to spiritual things, in which certain events are actually brought out to the fore and revealed, okay? So the ancients did not just see dream as you eat too late and go to your bed. They interpreted them as either coming from the gods, speaking to the morals and the spiritual condition or health condition of a human being, or things that were to come. Now, Nebuchadnezzar made a request for these magicians. He called for the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. Now, the Chaldeans appear to have been the spokesmen for the group, because these are the men that Nebuchadnezzar will be talking to, and they represented the entire group. All right? And just to let you know that Daniel fell within this group because he was actually what we call named among them. And you're going to see that coming out a little bit later. Now, when Nebuchadnezzar called them together, Nebuchadnezzar decided that he was going to give them a threatening test. Now, here is why it was necessary. It was necessary, excuse me, because a whole lot of these men would come out, and they were more discerners than anything else. They would read the mood of the king, or read the mood of whosoever they were reading up, so to speak. And then they would tell the king what he wanted to hear. In this particular case, Nebuchadnezzar decided that he did not want to hear what he wanted to hear. He wanted to hear what the dream was saying, right? And so you find that it is a case where Nebuchadnezzar gave them a test. Let's read of this test. Verse 4 of chapter 1 to verse 6. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your house shall be made a dunghill. But if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, you shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. Verse 7. And they answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know for certainty that you would gain the time, or you would stall for time, because you see the thing is gone from me. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation thereof. No, I can tell you, brothers and sisters, old time people say, the greatest friend of truth is time. And no matter how much of a con artist or a general we can be, there comes a time when it comes to an end. And so they saluted the king, O king, live forever. And it is a respectful thing. It's not that they were saying that Nebuchadnezzar should be immortal. No. The Hebrew understanding here is that to the ages live. It's like saying in today's language, long live the king, right? And they were seeking for this stuff to be divulged. No? When it says the dream was forgotten, there is probably about three explanations. Some people believe that the dream was actually forgotten. Nebuchadnezzar had the dream and did not remember it. But some scholars say no, because the word that they use for forgotten is almost the same thing as I will not divulge, just the manipulation of a few letters in the Hebrew. And so some people believe that the King James made a mistake, where the dream was not forgotten by Nebuchadnezzar, but it was remembered, but Nebuchadnezzar decided to say, not talk, that he was holding it back to test these men to see how true they were. And another school of thought says, that he was seeking to ensure authenticity of the interpretation of the dream. Because if their gods could give them the interpretation of the dream, their God should have been able to also tell them what the dream was. So let's look at it, everybody. Nebuchadnezzar developed a test of reward and punishment in case of failure. He was testing the truth of the abilities of these men. They had to give the content of his dream, and then they had to give the interpretation of his dream. Now, I can tell you something, that is the greatest test anyone could ever have. Because that would mean that they would have to know from the supernatural. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar was saying to them. Nebuchadnezzar was saying that you claim to be supernatural. Let me see if you really are. You know, we've often said to the church that the people who believe God and who are living for God are able to do particular things, not to big up themselves, but as a sign that they are having fellowship with Christ. And you know, the fruit defines the root. Let me say it again. The fruit defines the root. If what we say is true and the lives we are living are intact, then God will have to defend his own honor, because we have told the world that we are serving him and that he is the one that does great miracles. So if our life with him is true and our relationship is secure, then we should be able to develop these things. One of the things I hear is that people chide the church, that, you know, they don't see anything happening anymore. That's not true. It does happen. But, you know, sometimes, brothers and sisters, we do call for a revival in our church. We do call for it not to become the exception anymore, that people are healed, but it becomes the rule. Nebuchadnezzar was searching for what many people are searching for today: authenticity. Authenticity. Why? Because what he was feeling was very real to him. He never wanted anybody to make him feel good. If that was the case, he could have called one of his gestures, somebody to make him laugh and to forget whatever was happening. But he called for those who had spiritual insight. And that's why, as people of God, we must possess true spiritual insight, that when people engage us, we are able to truly give unto them that which is authentic and that which will change their lives. No. Nebuchadnezzar was testing the truth of their powers, because they claimed to have it. He was also testing the power of their gods. The king didn't need speculation for what he felt, because whatever he felt was real. What he needed was the truth. He needed sincerity, not manipulation. And he was looking for supernatural disclosure. Here is the threat that he gave to them. If they failed, they would be put to death. No, the first thing he said is that they would be quartered. Now, what they would do to quarter them is that they would actually tie both hands and both feet to 4 trees. And the trees would be pulled back, forced back, you know, to kind of build up tension in the limb. And they would tie the rope to that limb in all 4 trees. And then they would just cut all of them at one point simultaneously. And as all 4 trees snap back into original position, it would rip out the arms and the legs of the individual, and the stump would just fall to the ground. That's what Nebuchadnezzar decided to do. Or they would actually take the sword and hack them limb from limb. And what else was there was that Nebuchadnezzar would not only stop with that. He would go to their estate and he would demolish them and make them into a heap of rubble. But on the flip side, he says, if you are able to tell me the dream and to interpret it, then I will give you gifts, things that they probably longed for, rewards, and also places and titles of great honor. Yes? So we find that at the ending of the day, he gave them a test that was truly difficult. Frank E. Gable, theologian, hear what he says about this situation. He says, no matter how terrible the threats of punishment or how strong the inducements of reward, the wise men were powerless. They could only beg the king to change his mind and to divulge the dream. So Nebuchadnezzar, in about verse 7, literally says to these men that you are stalling for time. You are begging for indulgence. You are seeking a way out. In other words, nothing could help them. And they insisted that the king's demand was unreasonable. Let's look at verse 10 to 13. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore, there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such a thing at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Now I want you to see how God is setting up his own glory. These men who control the spiritual atmosphere of the entire Babylonian Empire, who had to report to King Nebuchadnezzar. They said no king, no lord, no ruler could ever speak or request such a request. They went further to say only the gods would know such a thing, and the gods don't dwell among flesh. So I want you to see the setup, right? God is setting it up for his own glory. What the king asked them in the prevailing situation was beyond their human ability or capacity. It was never done for any other ruler in human history, and they implied that it was impossible because actions such as these were done only by the gods. Now, the defense of the wise men failed to convince Nebuchadnezzar. So what he did is that he declared them to be charlatans and liars who are manipulators in his kingdom. And so Nebuchadnezzar decided that he would put all of them to death. So he issued a warrant that every wise man in the kingdom must be put to death. This included Daniel and his friends, even though they were not present. In other words, he sent out a warrant for arrest and execution. Now, we want to close with this particular section this afternoon or this evening, because God set up the thing. I want you to know that from the mouth of the pagan, that God set up the entire thing, because he's about to intervene. And sometimes, when the Lord allows something to affect the household of faith, it's because he has a plan. One man said it this way, that sometimes God upset you to set you up, right? So Daniel and his faith are about to come center stage. Chapter 1, verse 14 to 16. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made known the thing to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, that he would show the king the interpretation. Now, the decrees passed, everybody. And the officers have started the roundup process. So Arioch comes to Daniel's quarters. Daniel literally speaks to him and asks him why this is. So he's seeking clarification. And when Arioch tells him what it is about, Daniel says, you know what? Take me to the king. Take me to the king. When Daniel comes to the king, the first thing Daniel does, he secures a stay of execution. Now, I believe that Daniel must have been an excellent and eloquent speaker, because what the wise men, the Chaldeans and all of them could not have convinced Nebuchadnezzar for, Daniel convinced Nebuchadnezzar. And so he secures a stay of execution because he's seeking time to consult with his God. So he's not trying to stall to manipulate the king. He's trying to stall to draw closer to God to get the answer. And so we find that Daniel is here introducing the unequivocal power of Yahweh, the King of heaven, the God of the Israelites. And so he sought to display the reality, the wisdom, and power of the one true God. Yes? And so implicitly, he was disparaging the impotence of the imaginary gods that the magicians worshipped. And so in deadly emergency, Daniel knew that he could trust in the Lord. He hoped that his faithfulness to God would, he hoped on, or he held on, it should be, unto the faithfulness of his God. Right? Not even Joseph, the great dreamer or interpreter, was asked to tell the dream, but also to give the interpretation. But Daniel believed in the miracle that God was about to do. And so the theologian Frank Gaebelein says again, the pagan wise men had confessed that only deity could comply with the king's request. Nebuchadnezzar and all Babylon were therefore to be confronted with unanswerable proof that only Israel's God was real, sovereign, and limitless in his power. My. Verse 17, because you see, I think Gaebelein has it locked in. It was set up in such a way that only God could prove a difference or would prove effective in such a situation. Watch this. Verse 17. Then Daniel went to his house. He secured the stay of execution and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah's companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning the secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. You know, just before I move on, someone asked, and I saw it and couldn't respond at the time, if it is sinful to call Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, seeing that these names were Babylonian names. It's not sinful to call them that for a number of reasons, and I'll explain. For practical reasons, what is written down in history is historical fact. And so what these names represent is the attempt of Babylon to change these young men's culture and their faith. And even though the names stuck to them, the intent did not. And so from a historical perspective, we have to write it and speak it as it is written. Number two, these young men were faithful to God and to their covenant. And so if it's a case where we still call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, everyone will still know who we're talking to. But I guess number three is the fact that most people don't know them as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And so it's going to be difficult for it to catch on in a practical way, right? But nonetheless, if you call them Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it still doesn't make a difference. You know, it's okay. It's a historical record. So there's nothing wrong with calling them that, all right? Right. Now, we don't know how the secret was revealed to Daniel. We don't know the details. We don't know the details of what he prayed for. But we do know that Daniel spoke to them. Or Daniel received the answer as he spoke to God. And the Bible says Daniel blessed the God of heaven. He bent his knee unto the God of heaven. He saw God's glory as greater than his safety. He showed confidence in his God and he sought support. So he said to his friends, plead for mercy, the Rahim, And concerning this mystery, right? Regarding wisdom, regarding this mystery. All right. So Daniel's prayer to God is not recorded, but we do see Daniel declaring God's faithfulness in answering. And he expresses his gratitude to God, and he establishes truth over the pretentious pagans who served the king and the kingdom. What I love about this, brothers and sisters, and we're going to close here tonight, is that Daniel, after he received the answer, worshipped his God. When you look at Daniel talking, Daniel begins to wax poetic when he speaks of the great and mighty God. And there are two main things that Daniel looks at. He looks at the power of God and the wisdom of God. You know, we learn the word power. We speak of El Gibor, the mighty God. You'll see that as one of the names of God. It's from the same root, Geber, which speaks of strength. And last week we look at the Hokmah. Hokmah speaks of wisdom, wisdom that is divine, wisdom that comes out of God. So these are the two things that Daniel looks at. Firstly, he looks at Yahweh's power. Yahweh's power is seen in his complete control over history. Now, Daniel is saying this, everybody, because God had revealed the dream to him and the interpretation. So what Daniel is saying here, even before he reveals it to Nebuchadnezzar, and by extension reveals it to us, he's praising God because God revealed it to him first, right? What the dream was and what it meant. So he would know that God was exercising complete control over human history. And so he declares it in his praise. He says, God changed the times. He changed it. He meshen or mehashen. Let me get this word right. It's mehasne, right? That's the word. He makes different or to alter. In other words, God alters the times, right? Right? The situations of time. And he also changes the seasons, the length or intervals, or what we call the epochs of history, those particular moments in history. It is God who changes them. I want to just say to us as we listen that it is God who raises up and puts down. It is God who changes times and seasons. If you are going through an unpleasant season, the season of what we call the valley of the shadow of death, I want to encourage you to seek the God who is in charge of times and seasons and ask him to give grace to take you through and to deliver you from this time. I rest on that premise that it is God who changeth times and seasons. Church people and people in Jamaica in general make such a big deal over who is running the country and how long they're running the country. But remember, it is God who changes times and the seasons. In America, there's this big deal that if Trump wins, it's the end of America, which I said that happened his first 4 years, it didn't happen. And they say it will happen this time if he gets reelected. But it is God who changes the times and the seasons. He raises up one and he takes down another. And so God's name is the wellspring of the Hokmah, the wisdom, because it is by his wisdom that he knows when to change the times and when to change the seasons. He is the controller of history, of the epochs, and he is the controller of dynasties and monarchs, the all-knowing one who supplies the needs of his own. I want to encourage us this evening to trust in the Hokmah, the wisdom of God, as he leads us through the valley of the shadow of death, that he knows what he's doing. And at the end of the day, we will benefit. And so I want to just thank you for being a part of this lesson this evening. And for those on the YouTube platform, I really want to give God thanks for you. It is our desire that you will continue to do well. If you have any questions, I ask that you place them in the comment section. and we'll have persons who will actually look at those and relay them, that we can answer those questions in the next broadcast. All right? So I really want to thank you for joining us this afternoon or this evening, and pray God's protection over you. May the God of heaven watch over you and grant you strength, protection, and grace, that we'll be able to meet again in this fashion as we look into the word of the Almighty God. And so, brothers and sisters, thank you so very much as we say good evening, good night, and we ask that you join us next week, same place, same time, for another interesting study in chapter 2 of the book of Daniel.